Good evening. It's Friday, February 14th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amitha Sharma in for Maya Trabulsi. We start with breaking news on the coronavirus. Local health officials just declared a local public health emergency. They say it's not due to an increased risk, but to improve local response. Let's go straight to KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman live in Kearney Mesa with more. Matt?
Yeah, that's right, Amitha. Today, the county made their intent that they're going to declare a local health emergency and a public health emergency, and those will have to be ratified next week by the County Board of Supervisors. But all this is happening, it just wrapped up right here at the Council Chambers building here. We're also learning some more information about UC San Diego. The cases, yesterday there was 3 people there, 2 had tested positive. Now we know that there are an additional 6 people there, so 7 people are at UC San Diego. 5 are pending results for the coronavirus. Now, we know that this is all happening as the CDC is telling us that they are starting to look to see if there is some community-based transmission of the coronavirus. The CDC director saying to CNN in an interview that he believes that it will last longer than a year and that there will be some community-based transmission. Now, this local health emergency, health officials are saying that they want to reiterate that there's no increased risk to residents and that this is simply something they're doing out of precaution.
For example, by declaring a local emergency and a public health emergency, we are better able to provide direction and ensure resources to first responders, hospitals, and members of the local medical community. We are better to quickly access a stockpile of medical supplies and gain access to more hospital beds. We're able to quickly access emergency funds at the state and federal level and reimbursements if it should become necessary.
Yeah, now you see those 2 cases. So 2 cases have tested positive. A number are under investigation. And we are learning today that the county is actually investigating a number of people who were not on those evacuation flights from Wuhan, China to MCAS Miramar for quarantine. They're asking some people to self-quarantine inside of their homes. They say that over 170 people have been referred to them who may have the coronavirus, but they are continuing to investigate. There's still a number of people. We're waiting for some test results. We did learn that a 3-year-old girl who may have had the coronavirus, who was at Rady Children's, she just tested negative for the virus. Here in Kearney Mesa, Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
And thank you for that report, Matt. The coronavirus isn't the only bug being closely watched right now. The CDC says thousands of Americans have died from the flu this season. Daryl Forges has a look at the latest numbers.
Flu season continues to be a problem throughout the United States. The CDC says there's been at least 26 million cases of the flu this season, which started on September 29th of 2019. Of those cases, at least 14,000 have died, including 92 children. As the flu concerns continue, so do the concerns for the coronavirus. CDC Director Dr. Robert Redfield says the coronavirus could be around past this year.
I think this virus is probably with us beyond this season or beyond this year, and I think eventually the virus will find a foothold and we will get community-based transmission.
Right now, the CDC is investigating more than 400 people for the virus. 15 people have tested positive so far.
We've had a very aggressive approach to try to do early case identification and then isolation and contact tracing. That's enabled us to contain this at this point.
Back on January 6th, the CDC offered to send experts to China for help. The Chinese government did not accept or respond to the offer. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar is urging the Chinese government to allow the CDC or the World Health Organization to have boots on the ground in China.
It will not serve a purpose if the WHO team goes and is just confined to a conference room and handed sanitized data.
Daryl Forges, KPBS News.
Now to a breakthrough in America's longest war, one that has sent a generation of San Diegans to its front lines. The U.S. says it has reached a temporary truce with the Taliban that could be the first steps in ending the war in Afghanistan. The peace deal calls for negotiations between Afghans on both sides of the conflict to start next month. An eventual countrywide ceasefire and a commitment from the Taliban not to harbor terrorist groups like al-Qaeda. It would also set a timetable for the withdrawal of U.S. troops. More than 2,300 American troops have died in Afghanistan since 2001. 2 were killed in a shootout with Afghan soldiers just last week. For those who have served and are now collecting retirement benefits, there's a push to give them tax breaks. State Senator Ben Waso and a coalition of military groups gathered at the American Legion Post in Troyes View this afternoon to introduce legislation that would provide state tax exemption for military retirement pay.
California is one of 9 states who taxes the income of our veterans, and that, I think, sends a very bad message across the country that California is not behind our veterans.
Waso says thousands of veterans are leaving California because of the cost of living. He says more than 100,000 veterans would benefit from this proposal. The military plans to divert even more money to pay for new border wall construction. Nearly $4 billion will be repurposed from Pentagon projects, including military aircraft. While in Germany today, Defense Secretary Mark Esper had this to say about the president's move.
Let's say this much: border security is national security, and national security is our mission. I think many NATO allies understand that as well. The action we took is legal under the law. I think it should be no surprise, and I'll just leave it at that for now.
The Supreme Court ruled last year that the White House has the authority to reallocate money approved by Congress for border wall construction. As a result, many projects in military communities across the country, including here in San Diego, are being delayed or scrapped entirely. The wall is just one example of the way America's immigration policy has transformed under Trump. Another is how we deal with asylum seekers. It's been just over a year since America enacted the Remain in Mexico policy. Later in the show, we cross the border to show you how the situation remains desperate for thousands of migrants in Mexico's border cities. Reaction tonight to a KPBS investigation on the push for a new political party in California and how signatures were collected. San Diego State Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez sent a letter to District Attorney Summer Steffen to look into the Common Sense Party. This week, KPBS reported on how dozens of people who say they were duped into signing up. You can watch our 2-part report anytime at kpbs.org. Back-to-back debates took place today involving 2 of the more high-profile races locally, that of San Diego Mayor and the 50th District congressional seat. The Greater San Diego Association of Realtors helped sponsor the event in Mission Valley. The 50th District seat, of course, left vacant by the resignation of Duncan Hunter following his legal troubles. Among the big issues during both debates, housing, rent control, growth, and homelessness. You can study up on the congressional candidates and everything else in the March primary with the KPBS Voter Guide. It's customizable to your area and allows you an organized place to save your picks and save time while filling out your ballot. Find a link to the KPBS Voter Guide on the homepage at kpbs.org.
The election discussion continues on Roundtable with the contentious city attorney's race and measures to expand the convention center and shrink rural housing developments. Those stories and more on the Roundtable tonight at 8:30.
Despite requests to stop from the Attorney General, President Trump is still tweeting about his perceived right to get involved in criminal cases. The latest came this morning with the president saying he's not influencing the Justice Department, but can if he wants to. Boris Sanchez has more on the story that is injecting doubt into America's legal system.
Fresh off a denial he can be influenced by the president, Attorney General William Barr facing new scrutiny today after sources say he secretly ordered a re-examination of Michael Flynn's case, seeking no jail time for Trump's former national security advisor who pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about his ties to Russia.
The president has never asked me to do anything in a criminal case. I cannot do my job here at the department with a constant background commentary that undercuts me.
Trump today throwing Barr's words back at him, claiming he does have the right to intervene in DOJ investigations, tweeting, quote, "This doesn't mean that I do not have, as president, the legal right to do so. I do, but I have so far chosen not to." While sources say Barr has voiced his frustrations to Trump in private multiple times, officials telling CNN Trump did not know Barr would go public. Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham now insisting Trump wasn't bothered by Barr's comments, as Trump's Republican allies say the president should listen.
I have confidence in Bill Barr. I think he's doing a good job, and I think he's told the president this is not helpful, making it difficult for him to do his job. I think the president will listen to him.
Meantime, Trump eagerly awaiting findings from another investigation launched by Bill Barr into the U.S. intelligence agency's handling of Russian meddling in the 2016 election.
I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be.
Despite a consensus among the entire intelligence community that Vladimir Putin launched a covert effort to undermine the 2016 election, the New York Times reporting today Special Investigator John Durham is looking into unfounded deep state conspiracy theories touted by Trump and some of his allies that U.S. intelligence agencies framed Russia. Sources say Durham is even investigating former CIA head John Brennan, who says the whole thing is...
Well, I think it's kind of silly. I'm certainly willing to talk to Mr. Durham or anybody else who has any questions about what we did during this period of time in 2016.
That was Boris Sanchez reporting new details on the public memorial for Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and 7 others who died in last month's helicopter crash. Staples Center will host the event February 24th in L.A. It starts at 10 a.m. Fans who want to attend will have to buy tickets, with proceeds going to the foundation established after the crash. Those who are interested will have to register online by Monday before tickets go on sale Wednesday. Border Patrol agents have arrested a man after discovering 26 undocumented immigrants inside a tractor trailer. A canine detection team alerted agents when the man drove the truck to a checkpoint in El Centro. All the individuals were safely removed. Authorities say the man was a Mexican national who was in the U.S. illegally. It's been just over a year since the United States began returning asylum seekers to Mexico under the Remain in Mexico program. KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler gives us a look at how the program is playing out south of the border.
Remain in Mexico came to Tijuana in the form of a 55-year-old Honduran man walking down the ramp from the San Isidro port of entry on January 29th of last year. He was the first asylum seeker returned to Mexico under the controversial Migrant Protection Protocols, or more commonly known as Remain in Mexico. Since that day, more than 57,000 asylum seekers have followed in his footsteps across the southwest border, returned to Mexico to wait for their day in immigration court in the U.S. The Department of Homeland Security said it created the program to prevent asylum seekers from being released in the U.S. before their asylum hearings, a program they call catch and release. DHS and Customs and Border Protection declined repeated requests for an interview for this story with KPBS. It says the Remain in Mexico program is currently under internal review. But the administration of this program by DHS has placed migrants directly into danger. Asylum seekers have faced violence and persecution while waiting in Tijuana and have been virtually unable to access legal assistance. On top of that, Mexican authorities say they have their hands tied. They are simply complying with the wishes of the Trump administration.
Porque fuimos presionados por el gobierno de Estados Unidos, por el presidente de Estados Unidos.
Jesus Alejandro Ruiz Uribe is the federal delegate who acts as the liaison between the Baja state government and Mexico's president. He spoke with KPBS last week in Tijuana. Andrés Manuel López Obrador, Mexico's president, allowed Remain in Mexico to expand and began a crackdown on immigration along Mexico's southern border after the Trump administration threatened the country with crippling tariffs.
Este es un gobierno encabezado por un humanista.
Still, Uribe says that the goal for Mexican authorities has been to treat the migrants returned to Mexico with dignity. To that end, he says the government has opened up a hostel for migrants with social and health services and even tries to provide jobs for them. The Mexican government doesn't keep track of what happens to the migrants returned to Mexico. Many, faced with a months-long wait, enter the United States by jumping a fence or walking through the desert. Some go back to their home country. Others fall victim to violence in the border cities. A report from the organization Human Rights First found that over 816 people in the program have been murdered, tortured, or attacked while waiting in Mexico for their court hearing. In late November, a 35-year-old Salvadoran man was killed in Tijuana after being sent back to Mexico with his wife and kids. According to the coroner's report obtained by KPBS, the man was dismembered.
It's as if the border has descended into darkness, and we are all just doing the best that we can to ensure that people survive.
Nicole Ramos is a lawyer with the organization Al Otro Lado, which has provided legal and humanitarian support to asylum seekers in Tijuana.
At our office in Tijuana, we literally have had victims of human trafficking come to our office after escaping their traffickers, and we ourselves have been faced with personal danger as we're forced to find places for people to hide.
More than 27,500 people have been returned to the Tijuana-Mexicali region from along the border. To get to court, they have to line up early in the morning in Tijuana to be bused to downtown San Diego for their hearings. Less than 3% of those in court in San Diego have been able to find a lawyer, as legal service providers are stretched thin and private lawyers are fearful of traveling to see their clients in Mexico.
There is no access to counsel. The idea that an asylum seeker, an MPP, could get an attorney or could afford an attorney is simply laughable.
Uribe, the federal delegate, says the future of the program hinges on November's presidential election.
Las próximas elecciones en Estados Unidos.
He says that American voters will be the ones who decide if the program and America's current policy towards migrants along the southern border continues. Until then, the Mexican government will continue to accept migrants to a city already strapped for resources. In Tijuana, Max Nadler, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Trump insists he has the right to intervene in Justice Department cases. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Valentine's Day is a time to express our love to others, and as KPBS health reporter Taryn Mento tells us, local health officials also hope February 14th reminds us to look after our own hearts.
Today we're going to do your blood pressure, your glucose, and your height and weight.
Vital health tests can be as simple as a squeeze of the arm and a prick of the finger, but getting more people to the doctor is part of the challenge. The La Maestra Community Health Center's annual Love Your Heart event aims to make that easier by offering free screenings in its parking lot. The festival-like atmosphere caught the attention of Dante Ortiz while he was picking up his daughter's medication.
Can't wait, excited.
The 45-year-old got in line for the free blood pressure and glucose screenings, but he couldn't help worrying about the results.
Concerned. What if
the medical professional conducting screenings at a mobile examination room found he had diabetes?
It's very, very frightening.
But Sonia Tucker says it should be more frightening not knowing. She says high blood pressure can be deadly, but difficult for people to detect on their own.
It's known as the silent killer. So it usually doesn't give you symptoms until it's a little bit too late. And one of the organs that get affected is your heart.
The nonprofit La Maestra and dozens of other locations around San Diego and even in Mexico want to reduce the threat. They offer free screenings on and around Valentine's Day to connect people with care they need. Tucker says the annual event has helped 70% of La Maestra's hypertension patients get their high blood pressure under control.
Relax your arm. We can do lifestyle changes.
Ortiz says his big concern was glucose levels.
Being a good eater, I was a bit afraid.
But he got good news. He was within normal range.
I come out feeling better.
Other free screenings are available later this month. Go to kpbs.org for details. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
A lot of people are heading out tonight to celebrate Valentine's Day. They'll want to bring a jacket because it will be another chilly night. Lauren Rainson has our forecast.
Good evening, and for all of those who celebrate, happy Valentine's Day to you. That's why I am rocking my red this evening. Weather at home, pretty uneventful overall as we're going through the rest of the evening and overnight under a mostly clear sky. Now, there will be some shallow areas of patchy fog developing late after midnight with lows in the upper 40s throughout the metro. Widespread lows in the 30s to the 40s. Ramona, you're going to bottom out at 34 after midnight. Into Escondido, 39. Oceanside with a low of 40, mostly clear sky. Once more into Saturday, a lot of sunshine to go around with our dry stretch of weather continuing. There will be a weaker, and I'm talking about a weak onshore flow, so that could produce some of that morning clouds, marine layer, and fog. You're going to break free of that very quickly throughout the rest of the afternoon. Break back at those shades, temperatures in the 60s to the 70s. Ramona 71 into the metro 66, and to the south with temperatures in the upper 60s. Sunday, Saturday, Sunday, essentially that carbon copy forecast. Next powerful system will be making a push onshore throughout the Pacific Northwest. And those impacts will be felt, I'd say, as far south as Northern California. Of course, that is far away from us, and the only time that's going to be impacting you is if your weekend travels take you in that direction. And onto the future cast, that's what the radar could potentially look like during that time, as that system's staying well to our north. If you do have early week travel plans, heads up throughout the eastern half of the country with that next storm system getting its act together. And back across the northern Rockies and the Intermountain West with that next round of accumulating snowfall. But notice for us in our part of the country, just dry, a lot of sunshine. Temperatures certainly will take that for this time of year. Along the coast with daily highs in the middle 60s at least through Monday, slightly warmer toward the middle of next week with highs in the lower 70s. Inland, you're also basking in under all of that sunshine, highs in the lower 70s through Monday, middle 70s by next Tuesday. Into the mountains, ample sunshine, cooler highs in the lower to the middle 50s through Monday. A little chillier next Tuesday to Wednesday with highs in the upper 40s. Our last stop will take us into the desert. A lot of sunshine, our highs in the upper 70s all the way through Monday. Cooler next Tuesday to Wednesday with highs only mustering the lower 70s. Reporting for KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Lauren Rainson. Back to you.
Delta wants to be the first carbon-neutral airline in the world, and to do so, it's committing 10 years and $1 billion to the project. Beginning March 1st, Delta will start focusing on carbon reduction, carbon removal, and stakeholder engagement. That includes more fuel-efficient planes, reducing the weight, and development of new sustainable aviation fuels. And it's been a busy week for consumer news. Earlier, I spoke with SDSU's Miro Kopik for the Friday Business Report. Hi, Miro. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Amitha.
So let's start with the way some people are watching now by streaming. A big jump was reported this week. What does this say about audience habits?
Well, audience habits are changing drastically in the way they view content. It's shocking, this study by Nielsen that really looked at streaming, but looked at television viewing as a whole, or kind of content viewing as a whole. Americans watch nearly 12 hours of content every single day, whether it's on their mobile devices, whether it's on TV, through games, or hear it on the radio.
Where do they
That's
find
a
the
lot.
time?
It's amazing. So younger consumers, those 18 to 34, basically watch over 5.5 hours on a connected device versus less than 2.5 hours for those over 65. Older consumers watch 50 hours of live TV, traditional television every week versus 20 hours for younger consumers. So it's pretty intense. But what's funny in this study is that even though all this new content is being developed, people are still watching old content. So last quarter on Netflix, the most important stuff that was seen was Friends, The Office, Grey's Anatomy, and NCIS. The last piece of interesting information is the speed at which all this streaming is happening. People are cutting the cord at a faster rate. Today, over 70% of households have a cable or satellite subscription. Roku says that by 2024, less than 50% will. So we'll stay tuned. This is a big space.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. All these habits and technology are happening at such an accelerated rate. Let's talk a little bit about the devices that people are using that you touched on. A lot of people are watching this on their T-Mobile or Sprint smartphones. The merger was finalized this week. What do people need to know?
Almost finalized. A judge in a lawsuit brought by 13 attorneys general led by New York, the judge ruled that the merger can go forward. The judge felt that T-Mobile, which is going to be the new name of the brand, so Sprint is going to go away. The three things that happened out of the lawsuit, first is that the company agreed not to raise prices for the next 3 years, which a lot of consumer advocates were saying that they would raise prices pretty quickly. Secondly, they agreed to reach 97% of the country within 3 years and 85% of the rural areas, and within 6 years, have 99% of the country coverage and 90% of rural areas. So overall, it should be good for consumers. The last thing, the holdup, is the California Public Utilities Commission hasn't given the approval yet on the merger. They are supposed to sometime in the next couple of weeks give their ruling. They'll have a 30-day comment period, and then they'll have a final ruling. So if they kind of say preliminarily okay, it'll go ahead.
Okay. At the end of the day, consumers still will be paying. And we're going to pivot a little bit. So there was a new report this week on household debt. What new milestone was hit?
Wow. The Fed issued a report. U.S. households have hit 14 trillion, not billion, $trillion in debt. This debt is kind of broken down into 4 big buckets. The first one is home loans and mortgages and refinancings, student loan debt, auto debt, and credit card debt. Now, $9.5 trillion out of the 14 trillion is in home financing. That's actually a positive for consumers because we're in the lowest interest rate environment in generations, and so people actually save money in interest costs by refinancing now. The downside, and when you look at kind of all the delinquencies, you're looking at still the lower end of the economy, lower income to middle income consumers who are living paycheck to paycheck are extending credit, their credit limits to make ends meet. And if there's a shock to the economy and things kind of pivot, those numbers will go up much higher. So those are ones that we're going to be watching over the next number of months.
Okay, Mira Kopik of SDSU and Bottom Line Marketing, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Amitha.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. We leave you with music from Live at the Belly Up, which airs tonight at 11 on KPBS. Thank you for joining us and have a great evening.
Keep it down now, keep it down now. Voices closing in from all sides, warning all the ways to die.